So welcome everybody to the Change for Children inspiring called event number 1. This is a live presentation from author, scientist and Reiki master, Dr. John Tuck. It's called A Theory of Everything, Things I Wish I'd Known at Your Age. Dr. John Tuck is a holistic energy scientist. He will describe his story of 25 years of deep research and practical experience surrounding fundamental human psychology and the challenges and solutions that he predominantly derive from first principles. Backed by a holistic knowledge of energy from quantum upwards, the book discusses how you can apply the principles to living your best life and everything associated with it. A Theory of Everything, Things I'd Wished I'd Known at Your Age is described as a manual for life and a practical application for parents who are ready to take positive and life-changing steps towards harmonious relationships and thus protecting their children from unnecessary harm or trauma. John will now present for approximately 40 minutes with a short 20-minute Q&A after. The chat will operate as normal. I'll be trolling it for questions and bringing them back into the Q&A with perhaps their owners, so please beware. And one last thing, can everyone except John please now mute your microphone, and let's welcome John Tuck to the first ever The Change for Children event. John.
Thank you, and it's an absolute pleasure and honour to be invited here today. Thanks for everyone for expressing your interest and for attending. I'm going to now attempt to share my screen, and let me know, perhaps let Martin know with a thumbs up whether you can see that or not. Is that all good? Okay, great. Yeah, so actually, the title of my book is Things I Wish I'd Known at Your Age. What I'd wanted to do was to really address a presentation that I've given a few times on the book, but more importantly, with regards to what we're dealing with within this group. And what I came up with was addressing fundamental parent psychology and mental health for the well-being of our children and future generations. And as I mentioned earlier, I've worked quite a bit with Martin to scope the content in order that it's clear how we think that my approach and what I've discussed in my book can help some help. It's not a quick fix. It's more of a long-term solution, which will become clear as I progress through the presentation. Now, there we go. So what I aim to present is I want to discuss a significant trauma that I experienced at the age of 8. And how that changed my life and gave me the impetus and desire and drive to, if nothing else, research the truth about things like mental health, medical health, and essentially which scoped the experience that I had for the majority of the rest of my life and my career in several different directions. I'll talk a bit about my experience with parental alienation. It's quite funny when I mean I'll discuss a bit later. I spent several years with Martin during his darkest era in parental alienation, counselling him mainly as a friend. And when I showed him this presentation first, when we were going through it, he was blown away by the fact that I'd experienced parental alienation myself, because I never mentioned it, you know. And I think it was interesting for me going through this process and remembering back to some experiences which I had accepted and moved on from in my life. So I'll speak a bit about that. I'll then explain a bit about my career. I don't want to dwell on that too much, but mainly to just show you what's possible and what I've achieved since the significant trauma. The personal development that I did, and that, as I've said, mainly from first principles. I'll talk a bit about quantum physics, the basics, and I mean essentially how that, or a basic understanding of quantum physics, allowed me to bridge the gap between classical physics and the metaphysical, and what got me into provided a fundamental platform for my understanding of life and how I approach it. I'll also give some references out of interest at where I started with the most prolific books or documentaries that I watched. And finally, I'll talk about the book itself, the evolution of the book, and the purpose of the book. And what I'll close with is a synopsis of how I see this being useful to the group, and what we can get from it, and where we can move forwards with this if we choose to do so. I use a lot of quotes, not random quotes that resonate with me and my work, mainly because I'm not famous yet, and I don't actually want to be famous, but it is what it is. But so one of my first quotes I'll give is, one of the primary keys to developing stability and harmony and improving your mental and physical health, your life, and your interaction with everything and everyone in it and around it is in raising your energy, frequency, and vibration in coherence with that of your heart. So, what happened back in 1982 that changed my life? Essentially, I broke my head, and this here is a picture of, this is my sister and my best friend. And my best friend and I, it was a beautiful summer's morning. I think the family was going to the coast in the afternoon. It was a beautiful summer's morning, and my friend Nick and I were doing our usual bike rides around our village, Stenning in Sussex. And we had this habit of when we were going down a hill or freewheeling, we'd back pedal, go like crazy, backpedaling when we were freewheeling down a hill. And we came to the top of a hill above a church in Stenning, and proceeded to go like crazy down it. And I I I forgot that that morning I'd actually been banned from riding my bike. But my grandmother, who was in charge, didn't know that I hadn't been banned from riding my father's bike. Um, so I'd essentially stolen my father's bike, and I forgot that my father's bike, as we got to the bottom of the hill and started to backpedal, had a backpedal brake. And I skidded very awkwardly, and I hit my head on the left-hand side on the curb very hard. I had lots of cuts and bruises down my left-hand side, and I'm very grateful that my mother remembered later on where I said that the pain was. We did proceed down to the coast that day, down to Shoreham, but I started vomiting in the camper van that we had going down there, and we ended up at Shoreham Hospital, where I passed out. My mother said that it was a shame I was asleep for the journey to Southampton, because we were escorted down the motorway by no less than 5 police cars in a police escort down to Southampton Neurological Ward, where they saved my life. The challenge at the time, or challenges at the time, my parents were told that I had a 30% chance of not being a cabbage, which was acceptable terminology back then. And it must have been the longest 2 weeks of my parents' life, as I slipped into a coma for 2 weeks. made a recovery. I was completely paralyzed in my right side, which was complicated complex because I was still growing at the time. So by the age I was 8 at the time, by the age of 12, the length deficiency became very apparent in my right side. I still have length deficiency now, but the the years after that, I had multiple operations on my right side, essentially to correct tendon length deficiencies. I was given multiple physiotherapy, speech therapy, counselling. It was predicted that I'd be in a wheelchair by the age of 30, which to some respect was right. Even 3 years ago, I first fully stepped out of the wheelchair, and my book explains how I did that, maybe just as an inspiration to others. My condition at the time was assimilated to that of polio, multiple sclerosis, and rheumatism, because the surgeon, although they'd been able to save my life, they really had no idea what my condition actually was, or had any understanding of how to treat it. I'll never forget I had a groin tendon extension done by a very enthusiastic orthopedic pediatric consultant. He was very young and very enthusiastic, and what he was doing had never been done before. So what he did was he put one plaster around my waist and one around my thigh, and he connected it with a boat joist, which is essentially a three-piece device whereby when you twist the central piece, it extends or shortens the rod so that I could twist it every morning and extend my tendon. Anyway, I was on holiday in North Wales with my grandmother and mother, and this thing broke. And so we went to the hospital and went to ended up at the boatyard buying a new boat joist. And my mother had to hold me down while my grandmother drilled into this plate on my on my on my on my plaster. I think my point is, I guess even at that age, and under those circumstances, I was able to see the funny side of it. The two things which really challenged me were the constant pain, and the constant pain, as I'll explain later on, led to early alcoholism in my late teens. Not as an excuse, it was just an easy thing to do, and something which I have absolutely corrected since, and for the last at least 2 years have been almost completely pain-free. The one thing that fascinated me the most, though, was the psychological trauma, which I'll explain a bit in a minute. Essentially, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it gave me determination and knowledge that anything is possible if you truly believe. So, taking a break from that, my experience with parental alienation. Now, my experience is not nearly as traumatic or arduous as any of the stories that we've heard and that we know about, but I think I'm mainly explaining the ways in which, even throughout my life at the time, I was able to harmonize those relationships from the outset by using mind energy and by using the techniques that I've explained in my book. My father left home when I was 10 years old, and I didn't see him again until I was 16. And I'll never forget at the time, or throughout that period, one parent would tell me that they called every week, and the other parent would tell me they didn't. Both my parents were social workers and very, very kind and loving people. And looking back, I'm really impressed with myself in so much as I chose not to take sides. And I chose not to dwell on that piece of information and just get on with my life. Especially since it was shortly after my accident, and I could easily have blamed myself for what happened. So when history repeated itself, when I left my family home, when my boys were almost exactly the same age as my sister and I had been, I was determined that I was going to do it differently. So I practiced everything that I'd learnt, particularly in terms of uh, intention, energy, particularly forgiveness, and also a technique that I use to remove negative memories and negative blockages, because I just wanted to be the best father that I could be under the circumstances. Interestingly, this photo is this is Desi, my boy's mum. This is William, the oldest, and Alex. Interestingly, this little boy here is Martin, who was the son of a subsequent partner that I had at this time, and that partner is taking that picture. Um, I think that's quite a cool picture. Um, beyond that relationship that I had with Martin's mother, I again experienced parental alienation, but from the other side. My partner at the time was so toxic and so abusive towards my children that I didn't want to bring them anywhere near her when she was in that frame of mind, and I could not gauge when she was or wasn't going to be in that frame of mind. So essentially, I terminated that relationship. I will not be back, because sometimes it's just best to walk away. I will say though, I learned a tremendous amount about human psychology and relationships and life through all of the experiences that I have, to the point that I now am engaged to my twin flame, and I'm absolutely certain that we are helping each other in our path to personal development and spiritual awakening. So throughout all of this time, I've mentored a handful of friends and family, including my boy's uncle, who experienced parental alienation, and as I mentioned, also Martin during his darkest period. And for the majority, I've advised the long game, patience, and love, and confidence, and for the majority, the results have been very, very good, and they are now back in touch with their children. The only one who ignored some of my advice was Martin, and I am so grateful that he did, because look what he's achieved as a result of it. So that's a great success, great success. Yeah, so since my trauma, I I think one of the things I was absolutely determined to do was to prove, if nothing else, to myself that I wasn't stupid, or that I hadn't been mentally affected by the brain damage that I'd suffered. Um, I went through my first degree, where I was introduced to quantum physics, which, as I said, absolutely changed my perspective of life and the universe and everything, and also made it quite easy for me to begin to see what the truth from the trees, as it were. So particularly looking at the metaphysical and being able to explain certain energy processes or phenomena. I completed my doctorate at in 2001, also in energy centric field, and worked in fuel cells, energy generation. I led the first team in the world to friction stir weld thick section steel, which probably doesn't make sense to anyone, but it was quite a big deal at the time. And when the company I was working for, well, essentially, I presented to a conference in Montreal in 2006, and was approached immediately by the likes of the US Navy and ExxonMobil for my work. And I got very excited about it with my entrepreneurial hat on and skipped back to base, only to be told that, well done, but we're not going to pursue that anymore. And I immediately thought, well, either they're all idiots or maybe I'm the idiot, you know. Maybe, and since I was the only one I could do anything about, I jumped ship and bought into a business coaching franchise because I figured the best way to learn is to teach. So after having realised that I was the idiot, I learnt a tremendous amount uh, doing that, and a tremendous amount of transferable skills in sales and marketing. Do a lot of web design and finance issues and everything that until recently I wondered why I was doing it, why I wasn't just focusing on my career and my science. And eventually in 2014 I took my new knowledge back into my scientific field and co-founded a company who develop and produce ultra fast charge energy storage devices, or supercapacitors or ultra capacitors. I then became author of Fear of Everything, Things I Wish I'd Known at Your Age. I'm currently responsible for intellectual property at an energy storage company. I'm president of TBC INTV, which is an independent broadcasting company, and I'm a consultant and board advisor at my company, Silent Koala. And there's a significance to that name as I come to my next quote. I wonder if you can spot the connection between Silent Koala and Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla says the day science begins to study non-physical phenomenon, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of existence. And I'm absolutely certain he is talking about the metaphysical. He's not talking about anything in the mainstream. So okay, back then, what inspired me? What did I see that wasn't resonating with me? I mean, it was just, even at that age, I could clearly see that there was something very, very wrong with conventional medicine, medical health service. And I could also see that there was a lack of understanding or uh, well, proliferation of the science behind metaphysical and spiritual or energy side of our existence, and behind things that could not be argued when you look at them as being not real, not a natural phenomenon. I began to question everything at a fundamental level, and I realized that, oh my goodness, there was so much more out there than we were being taught at school. The constant pain in my late teens, my last operation was at the age of 19. It was to extend all 4 tendons in my toes on my right leg, and it was probably the least successful operation that I had. It was at that point I kind of not put 2 fingers up at, but decided that I no longer wanted to engage in in conventional medical services. I was just grateful for what they'd done already, but I was going to do it my own. But a part of that path was in self-medicating with using alcohol for the pain that I was constantly in, because frankly, the hangover in the morning was just as bad as the hangover from the painkiller drugs that the doctors were giving me. The other reason I used alcohol, or used alcohol as an excuse for using alcohol, was I just couldn't switch my brain off. I couldn't stop thinking, and I think a lot of that back then was actually the negative thoughts that I had from the negative blockages that I had. I started looking into, as a result, so-called alternative therapies. I prefer to call them native healing therapies, because they've been around, most of them, for much, much longer than the conventional drugs, medical drugs that we're subject to in today's environment. And I built a view on the global pharmaceutical industry in a similar sense that I built a view on the global food industry. Well, that's another story. I started looking into the other elements of life and the towards the metaphysical, astrology, numerology, sacred geometry. I spent a long time drawing sacred geometry, and also spent time with my children doing that, which I enjoyed. They enjoyed it for about 5 minutes, which was good enough. I started looking at crystallography, uh, Schumann resonance, and ley lines. Absolutely fascinating. I got into looking at the chakras of the body and auras. I also was introduced to what is Rife pulsed electromagnetic healing technology, of which I have a suite of equipment which I run, and am able to cure things like cancer, spelt with a K, by the way, for the record. I looked into the true history of humanity, Anunnaki, Sumerians, and who really built the pyramids and other megalithic structures. And I spent a lot of time studying the work of Nikola Tesla. Perhaps a geeky scientist joke, or not joke, but a geeky scientist point. Silent Koala is an anagram of Nikola Tesla, and I smiled for about 2 weeks after I found that. But that's just my sciencey thing. I've also experienced so-called drugs, or actually plant medicine, at various levels. And I built a library in my mind of what's actually going on the planet globally in the bigger picture. And I've believed for a long time that this period that we're going through right now is one of the most exciting periods of human history as we know it, or even don't know it. I think that there's it's clearly chaotic, but mathematically you cannot have order without chaos first. Order is derived from chaos, and I can see that very clearly now. So where it all began with my investigation into Reiki or energy healing was, I was just curious to see whether I could apply some of the basic understanding that I had of quantum physics to explain the phenomenon, because too many people said that they experienced the healing. I mean, could it be placebo? I didn't think so. So I was curious, and I engaged in my Reiki 1 training. And I remember leaving the um, the school on that day, and almost completely forgot about it for about 2 or 3 months. And then all of a sudden it started coming back to me, and I became really very keen to progress through it. I'd also got quite involved with the community in Marlborough where I studied, and we're beginning to draw the tangents on the physics behind the phenomena. So I completed my Reiki 2, and that gave me the use of or the ability to do remote healing. And that's when it really clicked for me, because I realized that remote healing could be absolutely described in terms of quantum entanglement, in terms of our connectivity, which I'll explain a bit later on. And it was at that time that I developed the technique to remove negative memories which no longer served me, which changed my life almost fundamentally. Changed my life. It changed the way I looked at life. It changed the level of clarity that I had in thinking and making decisions, and it changed the relationships that I had with everyone around me in an extremely positive sense. I mean, I wouldn't say it was the only thing I was doing, but there's a definite line between that point and the progressions that I made. So after 3 years, I became a Reiki master, and then I actually went further because I love teaching. I love being around people and giving them knowledge, giving them something. And I became what I term as a Jedi Reiki master teacher, but that's only because it's my initials, another geeky thing. And I've also studied Karuna Reiki, and I'm studying theta healing at the moment. And throughout that time, I began to give workshops explaining energy healing from a quantum physics perspective. And believe me, I'm learning about it all the time. It's a absolutely fascinating journey. I have a background in physics, um, little quantum physics, chemistry, electrochemistry, but biology was always my weakest subject. So I'm learning stuff about the connection and energy connection between the sciences all the time. And I think that this quote, I love this quote because this is so apparent. Essentially, when you're doing energy healing, particularly Reiki, you're not actually healing someone. What you're doing is you're facilitating the energy to come in order that they can heal themselves. So your body's ability to heal is greater than anyone has ever permitted you to believe, unless you've been enlightened, of course. Yeah, so on to the research. The research I first did was my first memory is the documentary Down the Rabbit Hole. What the bleep do we know? We know what they mean by bleep, but it was essentially the first time I'd seen a documentary which took into account all of the things that I'd noticed in and around the world that were just not right, but also explained the fundamental basis of quantum physics and how it applies to life. I also read, and this is in the early days, Jerry Tennant's "Healing is Voltage," which explained a lot about the fact that our bodies are electrochemical devices, and that our optimum voltage is 0.25 volts, and if that voltage increases as a result of electromagnetic radiation or toxins or whatever's in your environment, then you are more susceptible or prone to disease. Whereas if you're able to bring your voltage down to that level, then you're less likely to be ill. And I used to laugh at the happy clapper, tree hugger people, but oh my goodness, I get it, and I apologise for my previous laughing at them, because it's the best way, like walking bare feet on the sand, that you can replenish the electrons in your body and bring your voltage down to the correct level. Also confirmed by Bruce Lipton's Biology of Belief. Lynn McTaggart, the field is an exceptional overview of all of the sciences relative to life and our existence. I've used Deepak Chopra's quantum healing in my workshops, but more importantly, Joe Dispenza. Joe Dispenza is an amazing scientist who has an incredible story and has developed some exceptional techniques for harmonizing your inner self, your emotions, and your working with your psychology. Emotion, the movie was good. Zeitgeist, again, similar to Down the Rabbit Hole, took a lot of my understanding of biology and also psychology from stemming from a lot of the seeds that were planted in my mind from that. But a lot of the time throughout this period, I was learning about the deep, dark secrets that the world has hid from us, has hidden from us. And it was an absolute breakthrough when I started to look at materials such as Dolores Cannon, who back then explained what is happening to us now in the new earth that we are moving into, if you choose. Also read Think and Grow Rich and was intrigued to see that Napoleon Hill, although he didn't mention it explicitly, was absolutely talking about engaging with the law of attraction, which is essentially raising your vibration to that of what you want to attract to yourself, or lowering it if you want to some nonsense, you can lower it too. But so little bit on quantum physics. So fundamental function of a computer is based on binary code. This is essentially yes, no, on, off. It's essentially a decision-making process, which is exactly what we're doing in our minds, because we make hundreds of decisions a second, and essentially using the binary code. And I worked this out from first principles while studying the function of my brain when I was about 20. And this basic understanding, in combination with the basic understanding of quantum mechanics, has really, as I said previously, helped me to understand, if nothing else, what I put into the yes, that's true, or maybe that's true, or no, that's not true section of my bigger picture. So what quantum physics explains is that energy is everything and is all that exists. So everything in existence at its fundamental level is energy. And what one further profound observation is that everything in the universe is intimately connected. So quantum is the smallest unit of energy and information in physics, and a quantum of light is a photon. And if the photon is the smallest unit of energy and information in physics, that means that everything that you see or feel or even smell is made of photons. And photons are a light wave which you can neither see nor feel. And to embellish that point, Niels Bohr said, one of the forefounders of quantum physics or quantum theory, is everything we call real is made of things that cannot be regarded as real. Those who are not shocked when they first come across quantum physics cannot possibly have understood it. Because it is a bit of a shock when you realize those things. More importantly for me, though, that this is the one point that I've been really absolutely fascinated with is that the smallest unit, the quantum is the smallest unit of energy. A quantum of consciousness is a thought or an intention, which are real, tangible, measurable things, which means that our thoughts or our intentions can directly affect our reality, which is a lot of the foundations of the work that I've been doing. The great Napoleon Hill said, "Thoughts are things, and powerful things at that, when they are mixed with definiteness of purpose, persistence, and a burning desire." I having studied Think and Grow Rich, I followed the principles and I made a list, 2 pages A4 long, of things I wanted to achieve in my next career move. And within 1 month, I was approached by my business partner to start Zap and Go. And within a year, I could tick every single box on that list. And I look back and I thought, anything's possible, you know? Going back to Tesla, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. So, how did it all start with the book? Well, essentially, I was attending a so-called ADHD seminar given by a very much awakened child psychologist and author, Dr. Linda Mallory. And I was so full of ideas and so full of what I'd worked out and what beliefs I'd derived surrounding human psychology, and particularly with regards to children, that eventually Linda told me to shut up and stop interrupting the class. But to sweeten it, she said, "You should write a book." So I did, and I mean, fortunately, I had a year out at the time, so I had plenty of time, and it took me 3 months to write the original draft. And I still wasn't really sure at that time, so I sent it over to Linda just to make sure I wasn't talking nonsense, because I'm not a trained psychologist, and I'm not, I have no qualifications whatsoever with that regard, other than life itself. And what she came back with kind of blew me away. She said, "If every parent in the world read this book, then the world would be a better place," which gave me, I mean, I'd originally written it for my children. I didn't have any original plans to publish it, or, I'd written it for my children and for myself. I really enjoyed writing it. So when she came back with that, I decided to put the effort into to streamline it, and I found an editor who I worked with for 3 years, who promised to make it flow like water, and my goodness, she delivered. She's also a nutritionalist and health professional herself, which helped tremendously. Um, so it was first published in 2020, and I've recently republished or rewritten it slightly with my partner that I mentioned, my twin flame, Angela Mary Moore, primarily to word it so that it's more palatable for a more international audience, but also updated with some information that I've learnt over the past 2 years or so, or previous years before that. And also, um, Angela found a couple of professionals in the arena, recognized professionals in the arena to write forwards for me, and they really blew me away. And I think I'm going to ask Martin to read them for me in a minute when I show them, because it was his idea that I put them up. I'm a bit humble, I think. So So just as a really quick overview, and I'll just read these points out to you. What's the purpose on the book? I mean, the book's been touted as a manual for life. It's a textbook on how to begin to consistently improve your life. So it's not a quick fix. It's looking at every element of your life that you could perhaps want to address in order to put yourself in the best position moving forwards in every respect. It's a source of references. So because I've written it for my children, two things. Firstly, Einstein said that if you can't explain it to an 8-year-old, then you probably don't understand it yourself. So my first challenge was explaining quantum physics to an 8-year-old, which I'm quite pleased with. And the second thing was that, I appreciate that the truth is what you choose to believe, for you. So I wanted to make sure that I gave them the references to so that they could do their own research and so they could make up their own minds on what they choose to believe. It's a guide on how to raise your frequency and provides techniques for healing anxieties and past traumas, as I've mentioned. It's an introduction to manifestation and the universal law of attraction, which is a very, very real thing. And I'll leave you with an Einstein quote on that towards the end, which is quite short, by the way, just for Martin's assurance. It's an introduction to meditation and also binaural beats, which is where the frequency in the left ear is slightly lower or higher than that in the right ear, which combines to provide a frequency which is of a very healing nature, or enables you to access parts of your brain that you wouldn't otherwise be able to access in that respect. It's an insight into the truth behind what governs societies and, more importantly, how to avoid the harm that can result. I've also dedicated a chapter to the things they don't teach you at school. Many parents have asked me for this book for their children, which I'm extremely grateful to them for. And it's a path to purpose and ultimate evolution. Martin, can you read these, please?
I certainly can. And
Thank
thank you, John, for such an excellent presentation. I've never seen a chat so quiet and so many faces absolutely locked onto your presentation.
Yeah, well, that could be the good or bad, couldn't it?
I'm watching faces; they don't lie. Yeah, John's got his own back by asking me to read this, so I'm very deeply grateful and privileged to do this for him. This is the book Forward, and it comes from.
There's two of them.
Yeah, so this one's from Dennis Pitoko.
Yeah.
He says, rarely have I ever come upon such an extraordinary collection of insight and inspiration, such as that discovered with this book. John has clearly and convincingly distinguished his work from so many others by a mastery of the written word, coupled with a refined knack for keen observation and a refined art of storytelling. What you are about to read isn't just another book, but a living, breathing guide, which can reflect upon and embrace as a compass, which you can reflect upon and embrace as a compass for changing your life's direction. It forced me to step back, ponder, and pivot in a more thoughtful direction. Brace yourself, as you will no doubt do the same. Fantastic quote there. And another quote here is from Celine Cloutier. And I think, would I be right in saying that person's a she, John?
Yes, Celine Cloutier.
Yeah. And she says, it is a book as vast as the ocean and limitlessly filled with knowledge, life experiences, references, answers, insights, inquiries, and actually offers samples of all that one is required to reflect upon to awaken to what truly is you. John's endless curiosity for life, his deep experiencing of what suffering is, self-realization and research, place him in an honorable position to share his truths. John's guidance comes from genuine and unconditional love for humanity. This book holds infinite life knowledge, not learned from education, family, religion, science, or traditional medicine. This knowledge comes from the unlimited natural intelligence of rhythm of nature, available to all, yet for most to be awakened.
Thank you, Martin. Appreciate it. So just before I conclude, Einstein said everything is energy, and that's all there is to it. Match the frequency of reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy. This is physics. So thank you very much. Completely. I mean, I think what I conclude with is that, and I'll just read this out. You can apply everything that I've discussed in this presentation to your personal and professional life and the challenges that you're experiencing or dealing with. Changing a person's thinking and belief structure will change the dynamics of the relationships that they have with everyone they interact with across the board, both physically and metaphysically. As soon as the decision is made to change, one will begin to create one's own reality in line with one's desires or purpose. Thank you very much. Oh, Q&A. No, there it is.
Thank you, John.
So just go back to
Fantastic.
that.
Congratulations on an excellent and most valuable presentation. And if everyone wants to unmute and give John a round of applause, I think he absolutely deserves it for running the debut of events at
I'm honoured. I'm absolutely honoured. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, John. And please raise your hands if you have any questions. I've got a question for John. Why were you banned from riding your bike, John, in the first place?
Oh, yeah, interesting. I'm not entirely sure why I was banned from riding my bike, but the reason that was given was that I got a puncture in my own bike.
Yes.
So even if I wasn't banned from riding my own bike, I still couldn't have done because it had a puncture. So.
Oh, God. Yeah, I thought it was because you'd been crazy with your bike or fell off of it.
Well,
or
possibly. I don't know.
Right. Can you unshare the screen, John? So just so I can see if anyone has raised their hands.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Any questions for John? I'll carry on asking questions. We've got one from Alison, but if I can ask John before we go to Alison, if there was one moment that changed you dramatically apart from your accident, what was it?
I think it was my. I mean, there have been many moments, but I think if I could choose one of them, it would be when I realized I could remove my negative memories. It wasn't an easy process. It took a couple of weeks before I even felt that I was making any progress, but I knew what I was doing was effective. And when I made the breakthrough, it was just the most amazing, even moment of my life. Because, and then subsequently realizing the impact that had on the rest of my life from that point onwards was just incredible.
Brilliant. Thanks, John. Thanks, John. Alison.
Well, I just want to say that was truly amazing. And thank you so much. I was actually drawn to you before this meeting because I manifest, I visualize. And 25 years ago, somebody said to me, a quote from Wayne Dyer, change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Yeah.
And that transformed my life. It took me from a very dark place into quantum healing. I spent many years studying Wayne Dyer's work, and then I later when he died, I switched to Joe Dispenza. And and literally everything you're saying, I can totally relate to. And that's how I live my life now. And I attract things in exactly the same way. And my clients and people I support, you were just talking my language. I haven't written a book like you, but honestly, that just blew me away. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Alison.
Thanks very much, Alison. And yeah, Alison has written a book as well. So if you want to put a link in the chat so everyone can access.
Not like that, I can assure you.
Okay, any other questions for John? I mean, I can segue off the back of Alison's remarks there and say to John, if there was one thing you could say to someone who's in a very, very, very dark place, what would it be?
One thing. Love.
Okay.
I know. If I had just one thing to say, it would be love. Like the great John Lennon said, and I'm quoting again, but all you need is love.
Thanks, John. Thank you. Any other questions for John? I'd just like to go back to the night or the evening that John and I met, which was at a Reiki healing session, where he played with my head quite and completely put me to sleep. And then perhaps it'd be better for John to just describe the visualization that he tried to transfer to me.
Yeah, I was back in those days. I was experimenting with visualizations, and it seemed quite normal and acceptable to me to wander around in your head with a vacuum cleaner in the style of Queen. I want to break free, like that. And well, I mean, what I found amazing was that when you came to, there were three of us healing you, and when you came to, you explained to each of us what each of us had done to you. Absolutely amazing.
It was it was a true meeting of minds, quite literally. But John and I became very good friends from that moment on, and I'm very, very grateful and honoured that he's now part of the Change for Children. And it's always been my desire to bring these energy concepts and some of the things that many of the things that John's mentioned tonight into the Change for Children. We're all campaigners and activists in our own ways. We're all professionals as well, and it's an exhausting space to be involved in, and I think we all need to protect ourselves. And I think that what John has brought tonight, I hope, will go some way to that protection and a different way of looking at things to what we want to do, which is to accelerate the process of change, and that's for children, and that means everyone. We're all children, and to be honest, we still are.
That's the best way.
Absolutely. So with that, if there are no more questions, raise your hand quickly if you want to ask a question, the last question for John. We'll sign off for the night, and thank you very much, John, for doing that presentation tonight. Extremely valuable and wonderful. Thank you, and thanks to everyone for coming this evening.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.